far over.
Hi there, Facebook land and LinkedIn land and YouTube world. I'm Michelle.
I'm Jim.
We're from A Teague of Your Own. Welcome to another Motivational Monday.
Let's get motivated.
Woohoo! Hooray! Yay for us.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. Last week was fun.
Yeah, I did you watch it?
Sure. Just like the millions of other people who did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was down in South Carolina doing a training. And by the way, for those of you who wonder, yes, we do travel. So if you need us to come to you, we can come to you. That's how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we are mobile. It's amazing. Yeah.
I know. We can get on an airplane. We can get in a car. We could get on a train. We can take all kinds of ways to get down there to see you. So yeah.
Not a bus.
Buses aren't nearly as much fun. No. All right. So next week is Independence Day.
Yes, that's true.
I'm wondering if we should do something special for Independence Day.
Probably.
Like what?
I don't know.
We could talk about the Constitution.
We could, because it's being talked about a lot right now.
It is. It is. We could talk about how it affects businesses.
We could.
That might be different. Yeah.
Well, something to contemplate.
Yeah. All right, but today we're going to keep talking about Peter Drucker's Managing Oneself. We're actually covering two parts. Keep in mind, this book, literally, what is it, 55 pages? Yeah, 55 pages.
It's actually not even that.
It's tiny 55 pages. So we're covering two sections today. We're doing where do I belong and what should I contribute.
Okay.
When it comes to where do I belong, we're talking about, what field do you belong in? What industry do you belong in? What role do you belong in? That's what we're talking about here. Many people figure this out at a young age.
Yes.
And that's one of his points. He says...
Some do. I wouldn't say many, but some, yes.
He says mathematicians, musicians, cooks, for instance, are usually mathematicians, musicians, and cooks by the time they are 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, you've got a lot of people like that.
Physicians usually decide on their careers in their teens, if not earlier, but most people, especially highly gifted people, do not really know where they belong until they are well past their mid-20s.
Yeah, that's because you got some people that some people that they have a gift.
Yeah.
They truly have a gift.
Yeah.
And they know what it is. They figure it out very early. And I forget, Earl Nightingale had a term for that. Was it river people and shore people? I forget. But one group of people that, they know very early and that's what they're going to do. And they do it. And they start doing it when they're very young and they develop their talent. But, they figure it out fast. That's not most of us. No. And then you've got some people who they have multiple talents.
Yes.
And it's actually a tougher process for people like that who are very good at several different things. Because the reality in this world is that, at least initially, for most people to be successful, they've got to pick one thing.
Yeah, you have to focus.
Yeah, have to focus on one thing. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do more things later. There's plenty of people who do that.
Yes.
But, you take somebody like Clint Eastwood, for him it was his acting.
Right.
But then he went on to directing and producing, doing those sorts of things. But for him, initially, it was the acting. And he was very good at
Yes, he was.
Playing a guy who
He still is.
Doesn't say much.
Yes, the spaghetti westerns
Yes.
where he would just show up on a horse and not say a whole heck of a lot. Yeah.
and his character almost never had a name.
No.
Sometimes they did, but a lot of times had no name.
Then when he moved into, I guess it was in the 70s with the Dirty Harry movies.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Talked a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Did a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And
then he moved into the Any Which Way But Loose.
Yeah.
Movies.
Was, I guess, the 80s.
Doing those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yes. And then he moved into directing and producing, and found that he really enjoyed. Yeah, he really enjoyed directing.
And that's the thing. I think when you focus on what it is that you want to, you want your career to go into, and you do have those multi talents, one can lead to another.
Right.
And that's in filmmaking. That's generally what happens. Is you're an actor and you realized, hold on a second, I could do the directing, I could do the producing. There's a ton of stuff you can do.
Flip side is if you're really good in multiple areas, the problem with people like that is they have a hard time choosing one. They don't want to choose one. They like doing them all, but the world tends to reward you for focusing.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. The world tends to reward you for being focused and for really becoming exceptional at one thing. And yeah, for multi-talented people, that is a difficult process. And some never do. Some are, they're the so-called Renaissance person, where there's some that they find they can pursue all of them and do all of them well. Others, they just go back and forth. I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that.
Bo Jackson comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah, in athletics.
Yeah. He's one of the first people that I think of when you talk about multi-talented, where he did the baseball and the football thing at the same time. Primetime did that too.
Yeah,
Deion. But that's the thing. What do you focus on? Primetime decided to focus on football.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But notice some of these players, like Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals, he had an opportunity to go play baseball, and he decided he needed to pick one or the other.
Charlie Ward was probably my favorite.
Yeah, where he said, I'm going to go play basketball.
Because he was the Heisman Trophy winner for football, if I remember right, and then outstanding in baseball. And everybody went to him and said, all right, which one are you going to pick? And he's just like, basketball. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
That's what he did.
And so, yeah.
And he still had a very successful career as a basketball player.
So Drucker goes on to say, you need to decide where you want to go and take a look at what your strengths are, how you perform, what your values are. That can help you along the way. He says, but you also need to decide where you do not belong.
Yes. And
that may actually be more helpful to you than deciding where you do belong, because there are some places, either in different industries, different roles, different organizations, where you realize, no, that's not for me.
Right.
If you are somebody who's more of an introvert, you probably don't want to have to be in a room full of people on a regular basis, because that will just be draining for you.
Yeah.
So thinking about what your strengths are, what you do really well, can help you figure out, the answer to that question, where do I belong? Okay. The second question that we're focusing on today is, what should I contribute? And this kind of goes hand in hand with, where do you belong?
Right.
Because once you figure out where you belong, it should become very evident what it is that you need to contribute.
Right.
And the thing that he says in here, and I think this is very telling about people who are successful and people who aren't, is he says throughout history, the great majority of people never had to ask the question, what should I contribute? Because they were told.
Yeah.
What they were going to contribute.
That's been, most people don't realize that, the systems of government that we have, particularly the one we have in this country, it has not been around that long.
No.
And, not only in the context of, the entire universe, but in the context of the history of man,
Yeah.
it has been the blink of an eye. That's why we still say that what we've got going on in this country is an experiment, because it has, it's only been around for what, 250 years? Yeah, something like that. And yeah, it is still so new. That's why you still have many places around the world where people don't have the kind of freedom that they have in this country. And prior to this type of system, when you had monarchies all over the place, yeah, people were told this is what you're going to do. You're not part of the ruling class. Well, you don't make decisions. We're going to tell you what to do.
Well, and you still have that in communist government.
Absolutely.
Even the socialist government. Somebody will tell you, well, this is what you're going to do.
Right. Soviet Union. But that's why those types of systems always collapse, is because you're relying on a handful of people to be able to direct the efforts of millions of people, and they're going to get it wrong every time. Yeah. That's just a fact.
Yeah, because they're not thinking about what your strengths are.
No,
they're not
they don't
thinking
care
about what your preferences are. All they know is they've got a bunch of vacancies that they need to fill, and you're next in line, and that's what you get to go do.
Most time they barely even think of you as a person. Yeah. So it's, and that's just the reality of that type of a system. You just become another face in the mob that they have to deal with.
Yeah. So as far as what should you contribute, and even when you look at our country, the reality is somebody else is always telling you this is what you need to contribute. Up until more recent times, I mean, literally, when you look at the 60s was a cultural revolution for our country, where people were pushing back against authority, and they were saying, no, I want to do it my way. And that's where people truly started to question, where do I belong? What do I contribute? And companies and organizations started to become more flexible. And you're seeing now, over just the past couple of years, you've had to see a lot more flexibility within organizations because of what happened with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And people are given more choices of where they can work and how they can work and what they can do to contribute. So this is still an ongoing, evolving question to ask.
Oh, sure, always will be.
Yes, and it's
that will never be settled science.
No, it's very
fluid.
Yes, and this is something that everyone can continue to ask themselves, because it's not something that once you come up with an answer, that answer is never going to change. Right. And especially if you are a business owner, you're always going to be asking yourself, well, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to contribute? And if you're in a leadership role, you're constantly asking yourself that.
Right. Yeah, and it really goes back to, when you try to figure out what should you contribute. I think Zig Ziglar has it right when he says, if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want. So the correct answer should be contribute as much as you can.
Yes.
And we're not talking about this from the Marxist perspective of, to each according to his needs, from each according to his abilities. We're talking about this from the perspective of what are you going to contribute to society. Also understanding that you're in a system like ours, you're going to be rewarded for it. So there's I don't think we have not reached that point, and I hope we never do, where the expectation is that everybody contributes, out of the kindness of their hearts, because that so defies the nature of man, that until we reach a point where we have absolutely unlimited everything available to us, there will always be a need to make sure that you're contributing and being rewarded for it. Otherwise, there's most people will say, well, why bother?
And you need to look at this from several different angles. So when the kids were growing up, I thought one of our biggest responsibilities as parents was to make sure that those children grew up to be adults who contributed to society.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why parents, assign chores, and that's one of the reasons why parents make sure that their children can take care of themselves, because they want them to be, out there as adults contributing to society, not draining the resources that society has. And Drucker talks a little bit more about this part. He says, the big question is, what should my contribution be? Not necessarily what is my contribution, right, but what should my contribution be? And he says you need to take a look at, what does the situation require? Given my strengths, my way of performing, my values, how can I make the greatest contribution to what needs to be done? And finally, what results have to be achieved to make a difference? Because if you're only doing this to keep things going, you're not necessarily making a difference.
Right.
And that's the whole reason why you do what you do, is to make a difference.
Make a difference. More and better.
Yeah.
And that's really the perspective that people should be approaching things from. How can I contribute more? But again, not strictly from a perspective of doing this out of the kindness of my heart. This is, you can do things that are beneficial to the world and still get a return for yourself.
Exactly.
From it. And that is not only not a bad thing, I say it's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. I always liken it to, when going to the doctor. You got places where you have the free clinic, and then of course you got the doctor that you pay for, who is ideally going to make a profit off of having you as a customer, as a patient. And I'll tell my students, I'm picking the guy who's in it for the profit, because they've got a more vested interest in making sure that I stay healthy. They're doing it for a monetary reason. I'm okay with them making a profit. Whereas the other person, they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. Ooh. I want the guy who wants the money.
Well, you want the person who has an incentive for you to keep coming back.
That's exactly right.
And the person who's making money off of every time you're there has an incentive for you to continue.
They're not necessarily happy to see me every time, but yes, they're going to make some money when I show up. The person who is the not-for-profit, I just become more work for them. And and if they ever reach a point where they go, I really don't want to do this anymore, all of a sudden I'm not going to get good service. So so I think the profit motive is always a good thing.
Well, the other thing is, if the person who's doing it for a profit doesn't do a good job, you won't go there anymore.
That's exactly right.
And you'll tell everybody else, don't go there anymore.
And that's the beauty of the profit system that we have, is you can vote with your feet, and you can vote immediately.
And yes, dollars are votes.
Dollars are votes.
Every business that you patronize with going there and with your money, those are votes that you're saying, I think that you are a good business.
Right. That's why I look at those dollar bills as certificates of appreciation.
Yes.
And every time you receive more of them, that means somebody appreciates what you did.
Yes.
And it's good.
Exactly. So keep that in mind. All right. So interesting. Like I said, a couple of interesting sections there on what you should contribute and where do you belong. When we get back to this, and I think it'll be 2 weeks when we get back to this, because I really do think we need to take a look at do something different for Independence Day, which is next Monday. When we get back to this, we're going to talk about responsibility for relationships and how people actually need to take on that responsibility themselves. You're responsible for the relationships that you are in, and what those responsibilities are. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Okay, that's all part of managing yourself. So, like we said, if you haven't gotten the booklet, I kind of hesitate in calling this an actual book. 55 pages,
If you somebody made a promise to yourself that you're going to read more books in 2022,
that's it.
take you an hour and you're done.
Yeah.
Bang, you read a book. So you can find you a few more of those, and you can brag about how many books you read this year. So yeah, nothing wrong with that. It counts.
It does count.
It counts.
It's good information. That's the other thing. Is there's lots of stuff.
Oh, must be time to go.
Must be time to go. Molly must be telling us it's time for us to get out of here. All right, so if they need to get a hold of us in between now and then, where do they need to go?
Well, they can reach out to us on Facebook.
LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn. Then go to our website, ateagueofyourown.com.
ateagueofyourown.com. Yes. Other than that, we will see you next week.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
All right.
Bye, everyone.